Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. Today, we have a special guest with us. And for the listeners, as you already know, this is a podcast to feature business leaders in Asia. So when we talk about business leaders, we always talk about people in the West, right? The Elon Musk, the Gary V's, etc. But this podcast specifically, I only want to talk to business leaders and thought leaders, specifically in Asia. And today, we have a special guest here with us, Ian Chew, right? So how I got to know Ian is because I recently interviewed someone called Cindy Wong, who's an entrepreneur in the tea space. And I was going through her content and I saw that she had a meeting with someone called Ian Chew. And I looked up his content, and then somehow, or rather, when I was doing, I like to stalk people online. And while I was doing my research, then of course the Google algorithm kicks in, and then his TEDx talk was shown to me as well. And while I was doing research for this podcast, I found out we have so many mutual connections. So before I bring him on, I would like to do a brief introduction. So Ian Chew is the founder of Deeper Conversations, and he was a sociology graduate, and he has had conversations with 10,000 people, from homeless people to CEOs, and his work has been featured in top media outlets. He has a TEDx talk that I will refer to as well, so do check out that TEDx talk. He has been featured in top media such as Fortune 500, CBC, Inc. magazine, and also the Canadian Geographic. So he's also, as a copywriter, right? He's a top communicator. So today I have a lot of selfish questions that will come out today on communication. So, but in terms of communicators, he has worked with people like Eben Pagan, Simmons, Amir Nasr, and also when I was going through his website, he has a testimonial from one person that I really respect called Dennis Yu as well. Amazing guest that I have today. So Ian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, I forgot to mention, he's also a co-author of the book called The Potential Matrix.
Such a long time ago.
Yes,
yeah.
And because you know why I need to mention that, because you are the founder of Deeper Conversations, and in that book, of course, you feature ZRV, which is my favorite song called Deeper Conversations. So Ian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so like I mentioned, this is a question I ask all of my guests. And the first question is, what is your favorite Kung Fu movie?
Okay, so I was going to say John Wick, actually, but I was thinking about it just now. I think I was going to go with Stephen Chow's. What's that movie? The Kung Fu Hustle?
Oh, yeah. Kung Fu Hustle is an amazing movie. And I had a guest this week who said that movie as well. I really love that movie. And I was actually at the premiere of Kung Fu Hustle when Stephen Chow actually came to Mid Valley to launch that movie. And amazing movie. I love that movie because that story is amazing. That's why this podcast is called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. In Chinese, it's 卧虎藏龙. Because in that movie, it's really a lot of hidden dragons. You see the people in the community, they are like blacksmiths, they are landladies, and they are like labor workers. And suddenly they are Kung Fu masters, and the whole community came together to fight the antagonist, to fight the bad guy. So I love that movie, and I love how that movie portrays poverty as well. Like they were lining up. Sorry, I have very vivid memories of them. They were lining up to get water from the public pipe and etc. So it's a great movie. Good choice, Ian. Okay, so first things first. So I know that you had a lot of conversations with over 10,000 people. So can you tell our audience what is Deeper Conversations?
Yeah, so Deeper Conversations is a site that I created late last year. And the goal is to help folks to spark and build relationships, despite having social anxiety. So I feel like that's really a big challenge in society these days.
Yes, and I don't have social anxiety, but I do know people. I know in my circle of friends, there are a few entrepreneurs with social anxiety as well. So can you share a bit of your experience with social anxiety, what it is?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for me, I've had social anxiety for like many years. I mean, even until now. I mean, obviously now it's a lot less severe, right? But it started just back in the days where I was bullied in school, right? Many years, and then it got worse as I was going to university in Canada, basically. And I think I hit rock bottom during my second year of university when I got dumped by my girlfriend, and I wasn't doing too well in school, wasn't making a lot of friends in my university residence, and so it was really really hard to like talk to people because you have all these fears in the back of your mind that okay, what if they judge me? What if they reject me? What if they think negatively on me, right? So um, that's basically the challenge when it comes to social anxiety. It's a lot of thoughts you have in your minds. They are not necessarily the most accurate, but they do um, prevent you from reaching out to people and making connections.
Hence, that's why you started this project and you started deeper conversations as well. So I'll get to the deeper conversations. So first question, which is a selfish question, and yeah, so like a selfish question. So I have started this podcast not long ago, and I had previous podcasts as well. And as I mentioned, this podcast is to share stories from business leaders and thought leaders in Asia, like yourself. And as a podcast host, one of my things I have to do is to come up with the questions, right? And in your website, you do say the answers you want comes from the great answers you want come from good questions you can ask. So as a podcast host, what are the tips you can give me when it comes to asking better questions?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and no pun intended there. But yeah, I think it's like I've thought about this over the years, and I always at first I came up with like really fancy questions, like the really hard questions that get you to think. But over the years, man, like I feel like the best questions often are just like they're building on what they said previously, right? So they say something, whatever, and then you listen, and then you spot that they might be have more to say or to share, and you pick on that. Say, hey, by the way, you said you sounds like you're feeling that. Can you tell me more about what you say just now? I think questions that build on the previous response or like that pick up on previous, their emotion or something that they're like holding back from tend to be really, really powerful.
Yep. So that is a good tip. So that's why I have to do my research and ask questions, especially if the guests have done previous interviews. It is a good reference as well. How about in real life? Let's say you talk about social anxiety, and
Yep.
I meet someone, and you in your website you say there's things that called conversation starters. so I start the podcast with this question: what is your favorite kung fu movie? That's the way I start conversation. But like in real life, how do you start off the question, right? So you normally start with a question like how are you? It's not my favorite question, how are you, because how are you is
Yeah.
too broad. Like we met on LinkedIn. So when someone asks me on LinkedIn and I don't know that person, and the first question they ask me is how are you, I normally don't reply because that is such a big question, right? So like in real life, how would you go about asking questions?
Yeah, that's a good point on LinkedIn. To LinkedIn, I feel like it's very, very like businessy. So you got to have a focus there. When it comes to conversations in real life, though, I think the what I've learned is just be friendly, and I think instead of asking a question, make a comment. And I think this is what FBI did. This is what FBI does because they just make comments and then just get you to respond basically. And instead of you having to then respond to a question, it makes it then less defensive. So for example, let me give you an example, right? So you're walking around and you say, hey, interesting, I don't know, whatever, like scenery. Then that's an invitation for the other person to make a comment. And that's a lot less intimidating for folks because I think I've realized that more and more these days, folks are just defensive because they think, okay, why are you asking that question? Why are you trying to approach me, right? And making comments is usually uh, an easy way to start. But okay, but if you do want to ask a question, I think, the easiest way is just to ask like, something in relation to their presence in the place. So if they're in a coffee shop, right? Hey, okay, what kind of coffee are you getting? Something that's seems natural and seems very easy to answer, basically, will be helpful.
That is very good. Like, I like that statement on the scenery, and ask them a question. I would say a tip I would get there is ask them a question because you don't know that person. Don't ask them, why are you wearing this? So I ask them a question,
Yeah.
what is the drink that they're having? And it worked for me. I have talked to people that I don't know at a bar and ask them, hey, what is this drink? So it is a great way to start conversations. So if you go to the website, to Ian's website, deeperconvos.com, and there are a lot of testimonials there. There are a lot of people giving Ian the social proof, the testimonial there. And one of the keywords that you can find there is a lot of recommendations about Ian's listening skills. He's a great listener. This is the thing that has helped me to listen better. So after asking questions, the next part is to receive that question, is to listen, right? So being a person that is so highly recommended when it comes to listening, what are your tips when it comes to listening?
Yeah. By the way, I love that you did so much research. That's really, really impressive. I think it's a key to a great interview. But back to your question now. Yeah, when it comes to listening, I think a lot of it is just holding space, man. Holding space, and so be mindful of how much thinking you're doing in the back of your mind, basically. Because you're listening, it's natural that you're thinking, but then response, and naturally you're trying to get distracted. So I think it's like giving that person space, like shutting up basically, and then giving yourself space to like then listen. And I think the key really is to be mindful.
Yeah, being mindful. And I remember on your website you say being non-judgmental as well, and don't come I would say don't come to conclusions, right? So like, let's say somebody would say, oh, that is very nice. I wouldn't come to conclusions. I would ask very simple questions to follow up, like, why is that nice? Like the simpler questions you ask, the more I see that I can uncover. So is it like part of it as well, not coming up with conclusions when someone says something?
I mean, that's why I say, but I think in reality, it's like that's where I feel like mindfulness is really key, because you are gonna come up with like judgments. So it's I don't know, say someone says something that disagree with, you don't think, you're a piece of shit. That's bullshit, right? But you're gonna acknowledge that, okay, it's okay, it's okay, I'm thinking that, right? But then I'm gonna just like pause that judgment and then go back to listening, right? So that you're not caught up in the judgment. And that's because when you get caught up in the judgments, like that's how your questioning gets distorted, right? So you ask questions that reflect your bias, basically. So instead, what you want to do is acknowledge it. Yeah, that's okay. It's okay. I'm judging. Labeling that as judgment, and then bringing your attention back to conversation to then listen, basically. So listening is not necessarily like a passive act. I was talking about holding space just now, but it's more like it's holding space and moving between like the thoughts and then conversation, because you're always gonna be thinking. I mean, we are humans. It's really natural.
Okay. Mind me if asking, what is holding space? That means, do you intentionally don't interrupt that person, or what do you do then?
Yeah, just giving them more space to share. And then I think it's two things. One is like there's an element of psychological safety, making them feel safe to share, right? Because like disclosure is really scary for a lot of folks. So giving them reassurance, hey, I'm here to listen, I'm here to spark, whatever phrase that feels more natural to indicate that you are listening carefully. And then also like then just pretty much shutting up and then giving them the space to talk, and resisting the temptation to jump in. So because that's a mistake I've made over the years as a interviewer or as a leader, where the person clearly has more to share, but I assume that he or she's done. I jump in, right? So then holding space is like basically just waiting for that person to be truly done, and then you just respond from there.
That is that is great advice, like giving that space and trying to really listen to see what they really mean. All right. And in your introduction, you said you talked to CEOs, to homeless people. All right. So what is the difference? Like, for example, I could imagine someone who is homeless, and in your TEDx, actually, I don't know how to say that place. It's TEDx Moncton. Is that, am I right? It's called Moncton.
Yeah, that's correct.
Moncton. Yeah. Okay. So it's called TEDx Moncton, and you mentioned a story about someone named John, and it's a very touching story. So I do check out encourage the audience to check out that TEDx talk. It's a very powerful, just 8-minute TEDx talk. And so like, what is the difference when you talk to a CEO who perhaps is very proud of his achievements, to talking to someone who is homeless? Is it a different set of skills you need to have?
I think the skills are the same, but it's more like the mindset perhaps, because and when I say the mindset, I really mean the biases, because when you talk to CEO, you are going to have preconceptions about the CEO. Okay, maybe he's going to be XYZ or whatever. And same goes with a homeless person. Oh, you're going to be thinking, oh, maybe he's a drug addict, maybe he's whatever words that are negative about the homeless person, right? So it's acknowledging that, hey, I'm going to have all this preconceptions about the CEO or whatever, right? Because and that's normal, because we have all these like identities in society, and but the challenge that identity of CEO of as of a homeless person, that does not define them as humans, basically. And if you come in to the conversation with the idea that, okay, because he or she's CEO, therefore he's going to be behaving in a certain way, then it's going to be hard to connect, as on a truly personal level, from my experience.
That is great advice, and I think I started off with the wrong foot, having that preconception. Right, a CEO will have his insecurities. A CEO is also has family. He's a father, and a homeless person might not always have the same reasons they are homeless, right? So they, like you said, drug addict. They might not always be. They might have a story. So I think it is listening, reading between the lines, and it's listening and covering these stories as well, which I think is so powerful. Okay, and next question I will have is also a more selfish question that I will have, and it's something that I saw on your website and I find very interesting. So I am single, all right. So as a single person, I have to go out and meet a lot of people and talk to. I have to go outside of my comfort zone a lot to talk to different potential partners, right? Talk to different people in general, right? So in your website, there's something called How to Talk to Anyone. So let's say in my scenario, I am a single person. I go to the gym a lot and I work out. I have a lot of social activities. So what are your tips, especially for someone who is looking to date, right? How to talk to anyone? What are your tips for that?
Talk to like obviously a fellow gym goer.
Okay, so for fun for this podcast, let me paint the scenario. Okay, so I go to a lot of spin classes in KL. All right, I'm in KL. I go to a lot of spin classes, and one of my challenges is after a spin class, I might find someone very attractive, and then what normally happens if I find someone attractive is there's not much conversations I can start. We don't know each other's name, and then I'll just nothing happens until maybe if I see them at the next class or something, or nothing really happens. So that is my main challenge as a single person going to spin classes. So what is your advice for that? Like, how it's not really anyone, but that is that anyone to me.
Right. So you see an attractive female, classical work basically, and then I guess just to help you understand, man. So it's a challenge not knowing what to say, or it's a challenge of like just being strangers. What can you go deeper there?
Oh, awesome! All right. So let's get deeper into that. Yes, number one, I don't know what to say. I've tried the statement like you said. Okay, it was a tough class, right? And that sometimes works, but generally I I don't try that. I've tried that a few times, and the challenge is after a gym class, everyone's tired, and people just leave after 10 minutes. you might drink some water and just leave. So there is a time challenge, and then there is a lack of conversation starters challenge.
Right. Yeah. Not to see that. Yeah, the time, because I mean they'll be tired. I think that no, I never acknowledge the challenge there, because I feel like in my experience having striking conversations with females on the streets or in this like basically strangers, in the environment, is usually there's not a lot of time, because like they're going somewhere else, or unless you're in a cafe, right, which is different. They're going somewhere else, you're going somewhere else too. So the time to actually sit down and build that connection is really short. And so which makes it challenging, right? I think what I think about in your case is not to think about the conversation as a one-off thing. Think of it as a stream of conversations. So yeah, each time you go to class, you ask a question, you build that rapport over a few classes, basically, because you're leveraging basically on proximity effect, right? The more they see you, the more you get familiar with them, the more they'll be okay to open up. But to bank on like, okay, they're one conversation or two conversations, to then get the number, for example, would be tough. I mean, it would be tough unless somehow you're there, and somehow you're their type, or opposite, basically.
Yeah, I think that is a great way to approach it. Like approach it in a string of conversations rather than. So I think a lot of single guys like me have this challenge because we go to exercise a lot. So looking at a string of conversations, so I imagine that maybe the first time at least get to know their name before going for the number. Second time, maybe get to know what they work as if you see them again. And imagine as a string of conversations, and not long term, but instead of a single encounter, imagine as a multiple encounter sort of relationship. Am I right?
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. I'll share a quick anecdote here. So my friend's name Cami, and she's a marketer, and we were talking about dating for as marketers, how does that look like? And she actually, I kid you not, she actually had some kind of chart. I don't know what she had, but she was thinking about dating as a funnel, as a marketing funnel, basically, and just seeing it progress in stages. And I just thought that's always genius, because in a way you're not thinking about as marketers, you don't think about conversion like right off the bat on first touch point. That's bullshit. That doesn't happen. So you think about it as, okay, well, maybe that's front end, and maybe it's the Facebook ad, maybe it's landing page, maybe it's email, maybe it's whatever. And I know this sounds like okay, impersonal. So yeah, we're not pieces of meat, right? But the reality is it's the same, right? Because like, what are we converting here? We're converting, a stranger into a date, right? It's the same thing. And I think thinking about it more of a progression is helpful. Yeah, it is the pressure off too, as you mentioned.
That is a interesting way of thinking about it. Yes, thinking about it as a funnel. Maybe I should get up my HubSpot and and move them through the different funnels.
Right.
But yeah, you're exactly right. And coming to think of this, sometimes I think about this as well. And being a funnel, there are people with generally more opportunities to date. For example, being a funnel, your website needs to get a lot of traffic, right? So I think one way to hack that funnel, sorry, I'm thinking in marketing terms here. One way to hack that funnel is to perhaps to be the gym instructor, right? So perhaps to be the instructor, the instructor. Then that funnel will be much easier. Like you'll be teaching 20, 30 people per day. And it is easier for you to start conversations because you are the instructor. Anyways, and you have a lot of information, a lot of data going around. So that is one way to look at it. Or, in other terms, you could be in working as a talent agency, or you own a bar or whatever. Then the funnel is very, very different. So very good point there. I think that is that is a very interesting way. Very, very good point from your friend that she looks at it as a funnel. Maybe I should now sign up for HubSpot just for this as well. All right, so that is great. That is great. I love that. And the next part of the conversation I'd like to have with you, and yeah, so you've done like thousands of interviews. You've talked to thousands of people, right? So what have you learned from these conversations?
Yeah, good question. And then, yeah, I think everyone has something to share. Because sometimes one of the things I hear as complaints from friends, oh, I had this conversation, it's so boring, it's so awkward, there's nothing going on, there's no chemistry. And I think it's true to a certain extent. You aren't going to have chemistry with everyone, but to say that you have nothing to talk about in a conversation is, I mean, from my experience, that's almost impossible. Like almost everyone has something to share if they're open to it, and it's just a matter of time that you give them, the space and then also the trust for them to open up. And I think it just makes life a lot more interesting because I go to grocery stores, I go cafes, I go to wherever. Like this, I know there's someone I can talk to, and it just makes, yeah, it's, as I say, it makes life so much more fun. So it's one thing I've learned. Everyone has something to share. The other thing I've learned is, yeah, I think just the element of surprise. Going back to what I was saying earlier on that, you just never judge a person based on the title or the position they're alive in, but seeing them as real human beings is important. And I think I keep getting surprised by people saying things that I would never expect. I'll give you an example of that. So I was talking to this really big, burly French guy on the streets in Canada, and it just seemed really rough, right? He just didn't want to talk to me at first. But he started opening up. He started sharing more and more. And turned out he was actually an ex-gang member in Toronto. And the reason why he left the gang life was because of a girl who told him that he's smart, and he started thinking, okay, if I'm smart, I should go to school. And so he went to school, and they got married basically. But you would have never known, looking at his appearance. It's like such a big muscular guy, right? It seems like doesn't seem like had a lot to share or was willing to open up in the way that I thought. So the point being that is that, yeah, just be curious and then just be open.
That is awesome. Yeah, everyone has an interesting story, and I wish I could. Yeah, like I know you have the Humans of Sackville. I wish I know there are people doing this, but I believe even living in KL, and you're in Kuala Place right now, and I believe everyone has a story, from the auntie who is selling vegetables to the guy who is driving the bus. Right, he should have a story as well. And I think I will ask you the same question again, right? The
Sure.
same question. Because you said you talked to this French guy, and I believe
Yeah.
it is integrated in your life that you are having conversations with people all the time, most of the time, right? Sometimes. So what is your tip again to talk to anyone? So now it's no gym context, no hot girl context, right? So
Sure.
how do you incorporate this in your life, right? Talking to anyone in your life.
Yeah, it's something I'm still learning myself, for example, because I feel like, in the context of like the street interviews, it's a lot easier because you're going in with some purpose. That, okay, I'm going there to talk to them, to get a story. It's a lot easier to have this conversation because you have a motivation. Right? Versus in real life, it's a bit trickier because you don't necessarily have a purpose unless it's for fun, which I do find fun, and so it can make it a bit more challenging to start conversations. So I guess what I've learned recently is just to say something. And it sounds crazy, right? Okay, Ian, say something. Right? That sounds so simple, right? But I think just say something and see what they respond. So I think the conversation is really a dance between two people. And if you're willing to dance, they aren't, then you can't dance. There's no conversation to be had, right? So the key is like, you know, inviting them, basically holding out your hand, which means it could mean saying hi or we can comment and then seeing if they respond. And then if they don't, it's okay. It's no loss. It's not a measure of your value. It's just that they're not open to it. And it's okay. Just walk away, right? And I think the more you keep doing that, the more you feel at ease about reaching out to people like that. And the more you find that sometimes you just have to make an eye contact and you start talking. You know, have you ever had that ever happen to you? You make eye contact, you just start saying hi, you start talking.
Not really, but I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Right.
Yes. I think a smile might help. But yeah, I think it is very interesting. I think we should do it more. And you never know where the conversations would lead. And you never know who is the other person. I think what stops us a lot is the preconceptions that you said. I think everyone has an interesting story to tell. So if you had preconceptions behind your mind, then we wouldn't open up. And yeah, it takes two to dance. Like you said, it takes that person who is willing to share and you willing to ask as well. But if you don't ask, then there will be no dance in the end.
Yeah, I add one quick point, man. I think another big thing why folks don't do it, you know, because just in contrast to what we were sharing, right? You see folks swiping on the phones all the time. Right? It's just very common, you know. Even eating, they have their phone beside their meals. You know, it's such a big change from like the olden days, right? And so and part of it's like obviously the technology, right, to blame. But I would say technology. It's more like the fear that if I reach out, then they aren't going to respond. Okay, I'm gonna get rejected. And it's very common, right? You know, social fears, even not just for social anxiety, for normal people too, that the rejection is always real. You reach out and then they just don't talk to you, right? It's painful, right? And so I think it's that the pain of rejection that stops folks from reaching out. But sometimes you never know, right? As we've talked about.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point. And I think you've talked to thousands of people, and I imagine you face a lot of rejections as well. Am I right?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Right? And the follow-up to that question, I think it is more to people with a bit of social anxiety. Like I have an introverted friend, and she asked me this question. She says, Bob, you are very friendly with everyone. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but talking to me, you sense a lot of extrovertedness with me. But that's how I roll. But my introverted friend would ask me, how do you know that person will reciprocate? And she's generally afraid of rejection because she has a bad experience in the past. And I imagine you face a lot of rejection as well. But as in the work you do, how do you deal with that rejection?
Yeah, that's a great question. And then I think also kudos to your friend to be open enough to share that, right? That fear that she had. For me, I think it's like there's a bunch of strategies that I use, but I think the one that I keep in mind is that it's just acknowledging it. Hey, that's gonna be fear, that's gonna be rejection, right? That's okay. And I think sometimes we think about conversations. I think a lot of times we think about social like standards, in terms of like social success, it's a really high bar. Oh, we're gonna have a great conversation, otherwise it's a failure. Well, it's not, because like sometimes it's just saying hi and then just starting somewhere, right? Going back to the gym class example, you still start somewhere, basically, right? And so if they aren't willing to start the conversation, it's okay. Someone else is willing to start too, right? So I think seeing things more in a objective perspective, that okay, if I reach out and they say no, it's not at the end of the world. Even though it's painful, it's okay. I think having that perspective that rejection is okay, even though it's painful, is very important. Yeah.
Oh my God, I think I deal with that as well. So coming back to that gym example, now I know I have to start that conversation. If not, I'll just have to start the conversation. I think I have a difficulty with dealing that without, but it's a different scenario. And okay, so I'll ask you this question. So referring to my friend who has social anxiety, and she asked me this question, and I don't really know how to answer. Right. So I am a very extroverted person, besides talking to hot girls at the gym, I'm generally a very sociable person.
Right.
One example I would give is like I would visit different countries, and for example, if I'm in Bangkok, I'll make friends. The best people I like to have conversations with the best stories, are the bartenders. So I'll go to all these cocktail bars, and the stories of the city are contained in these bartenders. They have the best stories and the best recommendations of the best places to eat. That is my hack to a city. Do not go and Google, ask the bartender, what would you recommend to eat? So I have all these different connections. I can even remember the bartenders or even baristas of different cities by their name. And
Awesome.
I could name them, and I can tell you stories of how they recommended me to do this, and I went to do this. So I'm that extroverted person. So what my friend asked me, getting to her question, she said, "Hey Bob, you have all these superficial." She says it's superficial. She's a introverted and she likes high quality relationships. So she said, "You have all these superficial relationships. Where does it lead?" I'm saying it doesn't lead anywhere. So how do you have more? You say deeper conversations. So maybe perhaps deeper relationships. Like, and my answer to her was, not all my relationships are superficial. I have these conversations. I know the guy who does my chicken rice. I talk to him, know his story. I talk to bartenders and baristas. But I also have deep connections. But without that superficial connections, it wouldn't go anywhere. It wouldn't go to the next level. That was what my answer was to her. But would you have a different take on that?
Sorry, I love your example. I got distracted. What was the question again?
Oh yeah. So she said, Bob, you have a lot of superficial connections. I talk to everyone, but how do you build that deeper relationship? So you just have deeper conversations, which will lead to deeper relationships. Like for example, you talk to 1,000 people, right? You talk to that person who is a French guy who now you know his story, and how do you take it to the next level? How do you build that deeper relationship if you want to with all the people you have met?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. So I've thought about this before that too, in terms of like the role of small talk, in deeper conversations. Is that is small talk valuable in first place, right? And is it needed in first place, or is it the opposite of deeper conversations? And I've gone through a lot of research, and obviously done a lot of interviews and conversations, right? What I've learned, man, is that you gotta have small talk. It's no, it's okay. I mean, sure. Sometimes you meet the right person, you ask a question, they go blam, the the most profound thing you've heard. That's magic. I mean, I wish it happens to me all the time. It doesn't. And most of the time, though, it's just like small talk. And why is it important? Because you need to build trust. If they have trust, who's gonna share the shit with you, right? They'll be like, who is this guy asking me all these deep questions, right? I'm not bothered. So you gotta start with small, like so you talk, right? Okay, how's the weather? Whatever. It's boring, sure, but is it how you build trust? Yes. That's what the research says, and it's what I've experienced myself.
Awesome.
And so I think it's acknowledging like small talk and then seeing it, seeing it as a part of the process, basically. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So next selfish question. I know you have to go very soon, but this perhaps will be the last question.
Sure.
So through this podcast, and you have yourself as well, you talk to a lot of very distinguished people, like people with, like you said, CEOs. So with this podcast as well, it's also an opportunity. I'll talk to a lot of very amazing business leaders. So what is your advice to me? Like having a podcast is amazing, right? I get to talk to them. But how would you take that relationship to the next level? Like, what would you do after that? Would you invite them for coffee? Would you meet them in person? What would you do if it were you?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go full marketer here.
Full what?
Instead of thinking full marketer, I'm gonna go full
Marketer. Yeah.
marketer. Yeah.
The
Instead of thinking about it,
the funnel. Yeah.
instead of asking the question. So basically, the question is like, what's the next step?
Yeah. So like for example,
what's the next step?
You had your book, which is
Right.
the metrics.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
How do you take those relationships to the next level? Like those people you met who are very distinguished people.
I think there's two ways to think about it. One, I think there's two approaches. One is just like seeing the relationship building as a long-term process. So what does that mean, right? What do you do with that? So if you see it as a long-term process, then you just after the interview, you reach out, you have a conversation, you keep building from there basically. So that's one approach, right? The other approach is like just asking yourself, instead of asking what's the next step, asking, is there a mutual interest here? Am I just truly interested in this person that I want to talk to them? Are they interested in me too? If there isn't, then why would you want to build the relationship? Unless, sure, that's like the case to be made for like, okay, you want that business deal, but my longer term clients, they like me. I like them too. That's why we worked for like years, and years. And so I think it's important to acknowledge it, okay, or to be clear about the level of interest. If that person isn't interested in you, or they just aren't jiving, for example, and there's no why, then what's the point, right? What's the point?
Oh, that is great advice. That is good advice right there. So like if I talk to a business leader, I could find what are the commonalities. Is there any interest? Is there any potential collaborations? If not, why just build a relationship just for building relationship's sake? And I find that quite powerful as well. And you find common interests that you can build on from there. Am I right?
Yeah, it's about not forcing the connection. Let the connection flow. If it happens, it happens.
Amazing. That is great. All right. So thank you so much, Ian. You have great answers today to my very weird questions. So thank you so much for being here. Last question before I let you go is
sure,
my mission with this, as mentioned earlier in today's podcast, is to talk to thought leaders and business leaders across Asia. Is there anyone that you recommend to be on this podcast?
Yeah, I'm not sure who you have interviewed. I can name a few people. There's Daniel Cervantes. I'm not sure you know him. So he's a curator
I don't know him. No, I'm joking. He's actually a good friend of mine. Yeah.
Oh,
So definitely we'll get him on. We'll get him
funny.
on. All right. So I'll clip this out. I'll clip this out and send to
That's
him.
lovely.
All right. And anyone else?
That's awesome. Small world, huh? Yeah, in Malaysia, yeah, or in Asia.
Yeah, anywhere in Asia. It doesn't, especially my current challenge is to reach out to anyone outside of Malaysia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have anyone, let me know. You don't have to name them here. Anyone, just let me know as well.
Yeah, I'll make a note. Definitely give you a bunch of names. I'm gonna forget that. So
oh, thank you so much. All right, I really appreciate Ian. So you don't have to give it to me now. We can chat on WhatsApp. Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you for being on the show, and look forward to chatting with you again.
Yeah, great talking. Yeah, talk soon.